Welcome to the first lesson in our Principles of Design Thinking course. My name is Libby, and in this lesson, we're going to be introducing the concept of design thinking and the framework we'll be using for the rest of this course. What is design thinking? Chances are good that you've heard this term before, or at least are familiar with some of its key ideas. According to Tim Brown, the mission of design thinking is to translate observations into insights, and insights into products and services that will improve lives. There are at least a dozen different frameworks that describe how to do this in slightly different ways. In fact, if you type design thinking into a Google image search on any given day, you'll probably find hundreds of graphics outlining different versions of the framework with a variety of names. Tom Kelly's design company IDEO calls this process human-centered design. Other designers leave out the thinking part and just call it the design process. There are even industry-specific versions of design thinking, such as Eric Ries's The Lean Startup, which helps entrepreneurs apply design thinking principles to building a company. All of these variations can be a little confusing and occasionally at odds. But one thing they all have in common is that they describe a process, a series of steps to take you from the point of identifying a problem that needs to be addressed to testing a real, tangible solution to that problem. To me, it's commonalities like this that really define design thinking. Other similarities between these various frameworks include they're hands-on, user-centered, iterative, data-based, action-oriented, and elastic, which means you'll go back and forth between being very narrowly focused and then going broad to look at a high-level version of a problem. For us, design thinking looks like this. The first phase of this process is understand. This is where we deeply investigate the problem we're trying to solve and build empathy for the people most impacted by the issue. Even if you are personally impacted by the challenge you're addressing, it's crucial to gather a variety of perspectives in order to adequately address the problem. The second phase is define. Usually, when you begin working on a design challenge, you'll start with a big, broad problem. The trouble with the big, broad problem is that it can have nearly limitless potential solutions, some of which may be better suited to your specific situation than others. The goal of the define phase is to narrow your challenge into needs statements that are tailored for the people who will be using your solutions. For example, if you consider the gigantic challenge of combating climate change, you would first have to choose which part of the challenge are you taking on and for who. Are you designing for urban coastal taxi drivers or for rural inland farmers? Which issues impact each of these groups of people the most? Carbon emissions, methane emissions, coral bleaching? The define stage helps you use the information you collected in the first step of the design process to identify a more narrow focus for your solution. After you know who you're solving for, and you've begun to narrow your focus with a solid needs statement, it's time for phase 3, ideate. This is probably most people's favorite part of design thinking, and it's certainly what we think of most often when we think of designers. Essentially, this is our brainstorming step. The activities during this phase of the process are designed to elicit new and crazy ideas to solve the problem you're tackling, and then vet and select which ideas you'll move forward with. After you've come up with a few promising ideas, phase 4 will then begin putting them to the test. This is when you'll prototype your top ideas and find out what your users think of them. Finally, the last step of our design thinking process is refine. As you can probably guess, this is where we take what we've learned from our tests with users to improve the idea. This iterative process will continue until you've successfully met the need you defined in phase 2. One thing I'd like to note is that although this looks like a pretty linear process, in reality, it can look a lot more like this. In this introductory course, however, we're going to try to keep things simple. In each of the following lessons, you'll be introduced to a series of activities designers use during each phase of the design process, and then apply them to a challenge in your local community. Let's get started!